50 years ago, my father looked me in the eye and told me I was an abomination. He threw me out with $100 and a bag of clothes, choosing to believe his best friend over his own child. For half a century, I built a life he would never recognize. Yesterday, I learned that the good, God-fearing sons he kept have abandoned him in a cheap nursing home. At 75 years old, I am now driving back to the town that hated me to bring my father home. But before I share this painful and powerful journey with you, I want to ask for your support. If you want to help me keep telling stories like mine, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support gives me the strength to share the truth that so many are afraid to speak. From the outside, our white farmhouse on the outskirts of Knoxville, Iowa, was a postcard of Midwestern virtue. It was a place of hard work and faith, with a wide porch that begged for rocking chairs, a tire swing that danced from the limb of a century-old oak, and endless fields of corn that my father, Samuel, tended with a stern, biblical dedication. Every Sunday, without fail, we would don our stiff, uncomfortable clothes and file into the pews of the First Baptist Church, where Pastor Roberts' voice would boom about sin and salvation. We were the image of a righteous family, and for the first decade of my life, I believed the turmoil churning inside me was a personal failing, a devil whispering in my ear that I had to pray away. Inside that picture-perfect house, the air was thick with unspoken rules and the heavy scent of my mother's fear. She was a wisp of a woman, her spirit long ago worn down by my father's iron will. He was a deacon in the church, a man whose love felt as conditional as his God's. His world was black and white, and he was the ultimate judge. His best friend, Brother Clarence, was a constant presence, a man with a booming laugh, a firm handshake, and a Bible verse for every occasion. He was trusted implicitly by everyone, especially my father. But I was different. I knew it in my bones, in the very core of my being, long before I had language for it. It wasn't just a preference for the quiet company of my mother in the kitchen over the roughhousing of my brothers, Jacob and Matthew, in the barn. It wasn't just that my voice didn't crack into the same gruff baritone as theirs. It was a fundamental, screaming truth that the boy everyone saw, the one they called Samuel Jr., was a costume, a cruel disguise. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see myself. I saw a stranger staring back, a prisoner in a body that felt all wrong. My reflection was a lie, and my family, my church, my entire world were the guards of that prison. My father's strategy was loud, scriptural correction. A man shall not lie with a male as with a woman, he'd thunder, his eyes boring into me if I gestured too gracefully with my hands. God does not make mistakes, son. He made you male, so act like it. His words were meant to chisel me into the right shape, but they only ever felt like hammer blows. My mother's approach was one of frantic, whispered pleading. Please, child, just try to be more like your brothers, she'd beg, her eyes shiny with unshed tears, her hands nervously straightening my shirt collar. Don't give the devil a foothold. What will people say? Her love felt fragile, a delicate thing that could shatter if I failed to perform the role assigned to me. My brothers, Jacob and Matthew, were the eager enforcers of our family's rigid conformity. They were older, broader, and soaked in our father's simplistic worldview. They called me Sissy, Fairy, and Girl Boy, their taunts like tiny, precise cuts that bled my confidence away drop by drop. They'd accidentally shove me into the mud, hide my books, and ensure I never forgot that I was a walking embarrassment, a flaw in the family's pristine image. But the deepest, most soul-destroying betrayal came from the man everyone held in such high esteem, Brother Clarence. It started subtly when I was 11, a prayer session in his study that went on too long, his hand resting on my knee, then sliding up my thigh. A comforting hug After a particularly harsh punishment from my father that lasted too long, his body pressed against mine in a way that felt anything but holy. He began to engineer reasons to be alone with me, offering to tutor me in scripture, taking me for drives in his pickup truck to talk about the challenges of becoming a man. At first, I was deeply confused, thinking this was just an intense, if uncomfortable, form of spiritual mentorship. But the confusion soon curdled into a cold, gripping terror that lived in the pit of my stomach. His touch made my skin crawl. He would pull me aside, his voice taking on a low, confidential tone that felt heavy with meaning I didn't yet understand. He told me that my sensitivity, the very core of who I felt I was a spiritual challenge placed before me. He called my internal sense of self a confusion, a test of my faith that I had to overcome through prayer and by listening to his guidance. He positioned himself as my sole confidant, the only one who could navigate me through this. This is our secret struggle, he would insist, his breath a faint mix of coffee and peppermints. If you speak of this to anyone, especially your father, they will not understand. They will see only the confusion, not the struggle. You will be isolated. You will be entirely alone. He expertly twisted my own fear and loneliness into a weapon, making me feel that my truth was a dangerous burden that only he was strong enough to help me carry. In his narrative, I was the problem, and he was the reluctant, suffering guide. This secret, toxic dynamic continued for 3 long, agonizing years. I existed in a state of perpetual apprehension, a constant low hum of dread in the background of my life. My stomach would clench into a tight, painful knot every time I saw his car kick up gravel on our driveway. I began to internalize his poisonous narrative. I started to believe that I was fundamentally flawed, that my soul itself was somehow incorrect, and that my mere existence was a provocation. The shame was no longer just an emotion, it was a physical presence, a leaden weight anchored deep in my chest that colored every thought and action. It pulled me down into a profound darkness where I believed I deserved this shadow life. I retreated inward, my voice growing quieter, my movements becoming jumpy and nervous. I was fading away, becoming a spectral presence in my own home. When I was 14, the dam finally broke. The cumulative weight of the secret, the corrosive shame, and the ever-present fear became too immense a burden for my young spirit to carry any longer. I felt I was drowning on dry land, gasping for a truth that everyone around me seemed determined to deny. I had to tell someone. In a final, desperate act of what I hoped was salvation, I chose my father. One evening, after Brother Clarence had departed from a deacon's meeting, I found my father in his wood-paneled study, reading his giant leather-bound Bible under the warm glow of a single brass lamp. My heart was a wild, frantic drum against my ribs, its beat echoing in my throat. "Papa?" I whispered, the word trembling, barely making its way into the quiet room. He glanced up from his scripture, his brow furrowing in immediate impatience. "What is it? Can't you see I'm studying?" It's about Brother Clarence," I stammered, the tears already welling up, making the room a blurry mess of wood and light. "The way he is with me when we're alone. It's not right, Papa. It hasn't been for years. I'm so scared." The silence that descended was thicker and more terrifying than any noise. My father slowly, with deliberate finality, closed his Bible. His face did not shift into an expression of shock or paternal concern. Instead, it darkened, hardening into a mask of such profound disgust that I felt it like a physical blow to my chest. He rose to his feet, his large frame seeming to swell and fill the small study, towering over me. "What poisonous nonsense is this?" he thundered, his voice vibrating with a rage that made the lamp tremble. "Brother Clarence is a man of God, a pillar of this community. He is my most trusted friend." "It's the truth, Papa. I swear it," I sobbed, my entire body now shaking uncontrollably, my pleas raw and desperate. "The things he says, the way he acts, it's wrong." "You!" he roared, thrusting a trembling, accusatory finger directly into my face. You, with your unnatural disposition, your mannerisms, you have misinterpreted a righteous man's mentorship. You are the one at fault here. You are a willful, confused child, and you are trying to drag a good man's name through the mud to hide your own inability to walk a righteous path. His words were more destructive than any physical violence could ever be. They didn't just hurt. They dismantled the very foundation of my being. In that moment, he was not my protector. He was my chief prosecutor and judge. He stormed past me and summoned my mother and brothers to the doorway. Listen, all of you, listen to the slander this child is spewing about Brother Clarence, he yelled, his face purpling with fury. He would sacrifice our family's reputation, our standing in the eyes of our Lord and this community to cover his own confusion. He would see us all cast out. Jacob and Matthew looked at me, their faces identical masks of pure contempt. You're an embarrassment, Matthew spat, his eyes like chips of ice. My mother stood frozen in the doorway, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white, a torrent of silent tears streaming down her ashen, terrified face. Her eyes darted from my father's apocalyptic rage to my utterly broken form, and she did not utter a single syllable. She did not move to shield me. Her silence was the final, soul-crushing verdict. That night, I was cast out. My father shoved a small, worn duffel bag at my feet, already haphazardly stuffed with a few of my belongings. He pressed a handful of crumpled bills into my palm. "Get out of my house," he said, his voice now terrifyingly low and cold, all the fire replaced by an absolute glacial finality. "You are no child of mine. You are dead to this family. The path you are on is a stain I will not bear. Never return." I found myself standing at the end of our long, dark dirt driveway, the warm yellow lights of the only home I'd ever known, glowing like a distant, unattainable constellation in the vast Iowa night. The world I knew had ceased to exist. I was 14, utterly alone under a canopy of indifferent stars, condemned by my own family as a sinner, while they shielded the man who had weaponized my soul. I hitched a ride to the bus station and bought a one-way ticket to Chicago with the last of my money. The journey felt like a descent into an abyss, each mile carrying me further from a past of pain and into a future of terrifying uncertainty. Chicago in the late 1950s was a monstrous, roaring leviathan to a terrified kid from the rural plains. The noise was a constant, overwhelming assault, a symphony of blaring car horns, the shrieking brakes of the elevated train, and the cacophony of a million competing lives. The buildings were oppressive canyons of steel and brick, blocking out the wide-open sky that had once been my ceiling. For the first week, I slept in alleyways, huddled in the doorways of closed shops, flinching at every shadow and sound. I was cold, perpetually hungry, and the shame my father had branded onto me felt like a visible mark that everyone could see. Salvation, in its most humble form, appeared as a homeless shelter run by a weary but kind-faced Catholic nun, Sister Agnes. The simple, profound mercy of a warm bowl of soup, a slice of bread, and the safety of a clean cot was a grace I had not dared to hope for. She didn't preach or ask prying questions. She simply offered a quiet, practical compassion that stood in stark, beautiful contrast to the harsh righteousness I had known. It was within those shelter walls, surrounded by other fractured lives, that I began to tentatively believe that God might not be the vengeful, punitive deity my father had worshipped. Survival was a brutal teacher. I took any job I could find. I washed dishes in a steamy, chaotic diner kitchen, my hands perpetually raw and pruned from the scalding water and harsh chemicals, the burns a permanent testament to my struggle. I swept floors and cleaned bathrooms in a garment factory, the foreman's demeaning taunt of "girly" ringing in my ears as he paid me less than the others. I was still performing the painful daily charade of masculinity, a betrayal of my soul, yet my true nature betrayed me constantly. Every snicker, every leer, every hissed insult was a fresh echo of the voices I had left behind. But somewhere, deep within the rubble of my shattered spirit, a new ember was glowing, fanned by the very winds of their hatred. It was a stubborn, gritty resolve. "You will not break me," I would vow, my breath fogging in the cold air of a gas station bathroom where I sought refuge to clean up. "You called me weak, but I will become stronger than you can possibly imagine. You will not win." I discovered the public library. It became my sanctuary, my silent university, my true church. While my body rested in shelters or rented cots, my mind spent its days devouring knowledge from the shelves. I read everything: history, philosophy, poetry, and secretly, cautiously, I sought out the few, often dog-eared, psychology and sociology texts that hinted at the existence of people like me. The revelation was a lifeline. I wasn't a sinner. I had an identity. I was transgender. That knowledge, that single, powerful word, was a rope thrown to me in a stormy sea. I was not alone. My redemption began in a small, family-owned tailor shop, a quiet haven tucked away on a side street. The owner, an elderly, stoic Jewish man named Mr. Goldstein, was a man of few words who cared nothing for my past, my mannerisms, or my secrets. His only concerns were whether I could sew a straight seam, handle fine fabric with respect, and arrive on time. Under his patient, no-nonsense tutelage, I discovered my calling. The precise, quiet, meditative work of tailoring brought me a peace I had never known. In the rhythm of the needle, the careful measuring and cutting, the transformation of raw cloth into something beautiful and functional, I found a powerful metaphor for my own life. I, too, was being carefully taken apart and meticulously stitched back together, this time into my authentic self. I saved every single cent I earned, living a life of extreme frugality. My meals were often a single piece of fruit or a day-old roll. The physical hunger was a constant gnawing presence, but it was a familiar ache. I had been starved for love, acceptance, and truth my entire life. This bodily hunger was, in a strange way, easier to endure. I was feeding a different part of myself now, my mind, my craft, my indomitable will to become. By my mid-20s, after years of relentless scrimping and saving, I had amassed enough for a down payment on a tiny, run-down storefront in a working-class neighborhood. The windows were grimy, the floorboards groaned, and the roof leaked. But to my eyes, it was a cathedral. I cleaned it from top to bottom, painted the walls a soft, warm cream, and, with a hand shaking with a potent mix of terror and triumph, painted the sign myself: Eleanor's Alterations and Custom Tailoring. Eleanor. It was the name I had chosen, a name that felt strong, graceful, and elegant. The woman I was always meant to be. The early days were lean. I would sit for hours in the quiet shop, waiting for the bell above the door to jingle, practicing my stitches on fabric scraps, remembering Mr. Goldstein's lessons. My business philosophy was simple, born from a lifetime of being denied it. Be honest, be respectful, do beautiful, meticulous work. Slowly, word began to spread. Go to that new tailor, Eleanor. She's an artist with a needle. She fixed my favorite dress, and it's better than new. I treated every person who crossed my threshold with unwavering dignity, even those who were initially rude, suspicious, or openly prejudiced. My quiet, confident competence became both my armor and my weapon. Slowly, steadily, miraculously, the tide began to turn. The skeptical housewives became my regulars. The regulars became my staunch defenders. I began to live more openly and confidently as Eleanor. It was a tremendous risk, especially in that era, but I was done hiding. I had already lost everything. What more could they take from me? I found a community, other LGBTQ individuals living with bravery on the margins, and we forged a chosen family, offering each other the support and love our blood relatives had withheld. I hired my first employee, a witty young gay man named Patrick. then another, a resilient transgender woman named Sylvia. We were a little island of misfits, and our shop thrived on our shared dedication and understanding. Decades flowed by like a river. The neighborhood evolved, but Eleanor's endured. We moved to a better location. I bought a small, cozy apartment, filling it with books, plants, and a quiet peace I had carved out for myself. I lived a full life. I loved, I lost, I loved again, building a rich, fiercely authentic existence. I became Granny Eleanor to the younger generations in my community, the elder who had weathered all storms, the one who offered wisdom, a hot meal, a safe space, and a perfectly hemmed pair of pants. I believed I had made my peace with the past. I had forgiven my family for my own sake, to drain the poison from my veins, and had buried them in a distant, locked chamber of my heart. I was 75 years old. My life was settled, filled with dear friends, a grumpy old cat, and the gentle, satisfying rhythm of my hands, which could still sew a perfect, invisible seam.